welcome to the tasting room. I'm Mark, the chef and manager here. We've also got Bryce there, sous chef, and Megan, who's taking care of the front of house duties tonight. Make sure we're all refreshed and replenished along the way. So we're the team taking care of you tonight. Now, what you may have sort of noticed, maybe on your way in, is that you see a group of sheds up the back. So this facility actually sits on the fully functioning full-blood wagyu beef farm. In fact, those sheds at the back, just to the left of those, connected to them is the finishing feed lot, and that houses around 700 head of the full-blood wagyu cattle. There's about 7,000 head on the property as a whole. And then, just to put this into perspective before we move on, in terms of the worldwide wagyu supply, this is the largest privately owned full-blood wagyu beef herd anywhere in the world. So it's a farm of major significance on the global scale. But I always like to sort of bring it back and talk about what wagyu actually is. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion out there in the marketplace as, you know, what is this stuff, what's it all about? So it's good to start at the origin. So it is a Japanese breed. The breed does extend back 2,000 years. And what we do know about this breed, it's fairly well recorded in Japan through scriptures, through paintings. We do know that for 1900 years it was not used as beef cattle. There was actually a ban in Japan forbidding any animal that walked on all four legs to be used as a food source. So that ban was only lifted with the advent of World War I, and as they say, the army marches on its stomach. So the beef was then allowed to be entered into the food cycle. As they say, the army marched on its stomach, so they were fed to the troops. When the troops came home from war, they said to their wives, that tasted pretty bloody good, we'll keep that on the menu. But also to do with the westernisation of the Japanese diet and larger proteins were being eaten. So it has maintained its place on the menu ever since. But it's really this 1900-year history prior to them being used as beef cattle that really gave rise to a few body structural changes. So it was used by the Japanese as their beast of burden, as their draft animal, out there doing all that hard work in the fields. They didn't use water buffalo, they used the wagyu. So essentially over that period of time, they did develop to become a lot more heavy in the forequarter. They're also probably a little bit more barrel shaped than a lot of the beef cattle you'll see, which if you look in front will have this sort of real pear-shaped belly bulge. And they've definitely got a little bit more of a muscular structure and this sort of funny ridge in their spine, a bit of a high rump. That's from their spines literally being bent over time from that hard work that they were doing. So this is from the outside, because they're a black-haired animal. If you're sort of familiar with your beef breeds, when you drive past them, you can be forgiven for thinking that they are a black-haired Angus. So they look quite similar just on a drive-by, but when you stop and have a look at them closely, you'll see that there is those body structural changes from the outside. Now, it's really the internal change over that period of time that has given rise to the great eating properties of wagyu. So essentially this hard work, this hard labour, over that time they evolved a way to store energy. They stored it in the way of what we call intramuscular fat, or what is better known in the food game as marbling. So this here, this network, this street map of intramuscular fat, this marbling, was essentially the way that the breed was evolving to turn its muscles into battery cells. And it could then tap into this energy when it needed a boost out in the field. So it had to evolve to store this in a different way than what most mammals store fat. When we think about us, or we think about other mammals, a lot of different beef breeds, generally the fat is just stored as a highly saturated insulation layer to regulate body temperature. So it's not something that's there that they want to particularly burn off too quickly. I guess for us, we can think about it as if we do too much happy times over Christmas and New Year's, we'll find that it's quite hard to burn off that fat that we've put on in the new year. It's stored as a saturated fat. So wagyu store this in a very highly unsaturated form. Now, I just grabbed a piece of the wagyu fat out of the fridge. It's sitting at about 4 degrees, usually between 3 and 4 degrees Celsius. So I'll show you a great little trick that will happen with this, because it's very high in what we call the omega-3 and omega-6, the poly and monounsaturated fats. So this gives it a unique ability to have a very low melting point. So this piece that I've just popped in my hand, you'll see now is just becoming extremely oily and literally starting to melt from a solid fat to a liquid oil just from the heat of my hands. So this is very important in terms of the cooking process. But when we think about this, it'll do basically this will do a bit of a magic trick tonight. One way. A little bit of a magic trick. So when you get this cooked steak, you won't see any of this white fat running through it, like you would with a regular steak if it had that kind of marbling. This has got a melting point of 28 degrees Celsius, which means that we no longer think about this like a fat. We really think about it as a trapped oil. So when it goes onto the heat, that starts to melt down very readily, very easily. Even to talk about cooking temperatures, even a rare steak has an internal temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. So now I'll probably be cooking these to more of that medium rare tonight. But when this steak gets to you, you'll notice that there will be a few maybe clear lines of fat running through it, clear lines of oil, but the majority of it would have melted down and worked its way around those muscle fibres, maintaining the beautiful tenderness of the beef, keeping it nice and juicy as well, and also imparting that beautiful buttery mouthfeel. So it gives us the three things that we want in a steak: tenderness, flavour and juiciness. So it's all to do with that beautiful intramuscular fat, that marbling, and it's something that has not been specifically engineered into the breed, something that just happened over time. But of course, with the genetic breeding that we've got at Mayura Station, we do select the best breeders to hopefully, they have actually increased the marble scores of the herd over time. And even though they're not doing that hard labour anymore, we can maintain the marbling in the beef. Now just to talk through some of the cuts we've got tonight. Got one of those with the meat there, Ross. Yeah. So the first course will be some oyster blade. And this is served as a carpaccio. So if you haven't had raw beef before, tonight's your lucky night. So as you can see here, very thinly sliced. It's got a beautiful little dusty on the outside, but really this is more to highlight the versatility of wagyu. So we can take oyster blade, the cut that you usually think about from the supermarket, that one you have to slow cook and stew for hours on end. It's tough, it's chewy, it's full of sinew, it's no good. You have to put it in a stew. Well, we can actually take this cut, thinly slice it, serve it completely raw, and will melt on your tongue like putting a bit of fairy floss on there and just coat your tongue. It's absolutely beautiful. This is, in fact, everything tonight's what we call a 9+ marble score, so very highly marbled. And what you'll notice is that when this gets you, you can even see it at the moment, just like I demonstrated with that fat in my hand, you'll see that it's starting to get that beautiful clear glisten on the top. It won't completely melt away, but what you'll notice is it becomes very shiny. You can even just pick a little bit up and just run it between your fingers just to sort of really feel that beautiful low melting point and the lusciousness of the oils. Now, second course, meat on a stick. It's a little bit more than that, and once again, this one's also to highlight the versatility of wagyu. So this is some chuck steak. Now, I reckon if you went into your local butcher or the local supermarket and you cut some chuck steak like that, put it on a skewer, rolled it over your barbecue, and then decided to take a bite, so you probably give up after the first piece, chuck it in the bin and think, what did I do that for? So this once again is to highlight the real versatility that pretty much anything that's not the shank on the wagyu, maybe the tail and the neck as well, basically any other cut we can prepare in a way that it can be grilled. So this will have a beautiful pleasant chew. You can see some wonderful thicker lines of marbling through this. So have that real burst of butteriness, and yeah, I'll leave you to have a think about it when you try it, and just remember, chuck steak, see what you find. Main course, we're going to take a big U-turn away from what are our traditional secondary cuts and head straight into the eye fillet. So you're very lucky carnivores tonight. Beautiful piece of eye fillet, nice pretty thick cut piece as well. As you see, the eye fillets are renowned for their softness and tenderness. Generally not very well renowned for having a high marble score, but as you can see, wonderful fine marbling through these. So we get that nice bit of balance between the flavour of the beef. Now, I guess also to quickly talk about eye fillet in general, generally not renowned for flavour. Eye fillets, yeah, it's always tender, but pretty much doesn't really have much flavour profile. So this is a great way to show you tonight as well that you get beautiful flavour profiles, especially with our Mayura full blood wagyu, but also that great balance between the tenderness of the beef and the little bit of butteriness from that marbling. So a quick display up here about where these cuts are coming from tonight. First course, oyster blade up here on the shoulder blade. It literally sits on the shoulder blade muscle, and it looks like an oyster sitting in its shell. It's that same sort of shape, a bit thicker at one end, goes down to a little bit of a thin sort of plane at the end. As I say, usually that thing that we'd only ever chuck in the stew pot, but tonight I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised with how it comes up completely raw. Second course is from this chuck steak up here. So the chuck roll is part of the entire back strap that runs from just behind the neck all the way to the rump. It's split into these three sections as you see. So there's one back strap either side of the backbone. This one here is the chuck steak. And then we go through to the ribeye or Scotch fillet, finishing here with a sirloin, a strip loin, or porterhouse as well. These two cuts are generally considered your sort of prime cuts because they don't really do any work except for a bit of structural support. This is where we get into your sort of technical secondary cut category. There is some work going up through the top of the shoulder, connective tissues and tendons from there through to the neck. Now we don't worry about all that stuff because in terms of wagyu, it's still a prime cut, and you'll get to experience that with that second course. Main course, as I said, sirloin is on the outside of the backbone. The eye fillet, tenderloin, also called the undercut, is actually on the underside of the backbone. It's a small piece on the T-bone. So T-bone has the big piece of the sirloin and a small piece on the inside of the eye fillet. So that one does even less work than this muscle that's just sitting up on the back for a bit of support, which is why it's always so tender. Rule of thumb with beef, the less work a muscle does, the more tender it is, and it's the other way around, more work, less tender. Don't really have that problem with wagyu, fortunately. But yeah, great one to really highlight, as I say, flavour, that beautiful butteriness, and wonderful texture. Now, Mayura is very special in terms of the genetics on the farm. So there is that terminology you may have heard me using a couple of times now, which is full blood wagyu. So the importance of that terminology means that the genetics and the bloodlines on the Mayura farm are the original Japanese wagyu genetics and bloodlines. They have not been crossbred, the bloodlines haven't been diluted in any way. So to put this in perspective for the Australian market and Australian farms, 97% of what is farmed and sold as wagyu in Australia is crossbred. So there's only 3% that are full blood, the real deal. That 97%, the overwhelming majority of those are what we call an F1 cross, which means you have a full blood wagyu bull and then a different cow. So it could be an Angus, shorthorn. They like to use Brahman up in Queensland because they help them deal with the heat a lot better. So their offspring, we can confidently say half wagyu, half another breed. That can be sold to restaurants, they can put it on their menu, and you can be told that you're having a 300-gram wagyu steak, and you'd be none the wiser. So tonight you're having the real deal. We also do a fairly comprehensive grain feeding process. So it's a minimum of 500 days on grain. So what that does is enhance the flavour, enhance the marbling, and make what is already a great product even more unique. And then what we can say is literally the icing on the cake is that they get fed for the, well, it really ramps up as soon as they hit the feedlot. In the feedlot for 10 months, but the background fed grain before that. The feedlot, they start to get this stuff. Now this ramps up over the last 4 months where they're having 2 kilograms of the chocolate and lolly mix mixed with their 10 kilograms of grain and fodder. So this is literally the seconds from Cadbury's and Allen's. So you see you've got the twisted up bits of lolly in there. There's usually a few little, what's that, fruit chop or something like that. There's usually lolly snakes and teeth. There's a bit of a pineapple in there. I went up there earlier today with a private lunch group we had. There's lolly snakes, lolly teeth up there. So it's basically, as I say, it's the seconds from Cadbury's and Allen's. It's about 70% chocolate, about 30% lollies. They have, as I say, just over 2 kilograms per beast per day for the last 4 months. And this really does give the Mayura Wagyu a completely different flavour profile to that of any other Wagyu product out there. Increases the marbling, and also gives it a nice little story to say you had some chocolate-fed Wagyu. So there we go. We don't massage, no, but they do stay up. The feedlot is what we call the Moo Cow Motel, 5-star accommodation for Wagyu beef. So the sawdust is changed every week. They're very extensive sized pens, so they're not shoulder to shoulder. They've got quite a lot of room to move around. It's basically a huge open air barn, so they can, tonight with a bit of rain, they'll be all under the barn and just relaxing in the shelter. When it gets a bit cooler and there's a sunny day, they'll sort of walk outside and enjoy the sunshine. It's a fully automated feedlot, so for 700 head of cattle, there's 2 blokes that run it. So it's a very efficient feedlot system. the only fully automated feedlot in the Southern Hemisphere. So yeah, that's what we do. No massaging. We don't feed them beer, we feed them chocolates. And they get to stay in the Motel Hotel. Any other questions? No? Well, feel free to what?
I was going to ask about the fact that the intramuscular marbling developed as a result and being recency burden, and so the more work they did, they wanted the quick access to what factors and
Exactly, yeah, that's what is believed, that it is that excess work that they did that made them build up those fat stores in their